So Darren, thanks for joining us again to go through some of the frequently asked questions that we get around taxation and property here at Your Property Financial. And really appreciate your time at Mansell & Co. Accountants to spare a few moments to go through some of these questions. First instance, this is obviously a general chat on YouTube, chatting through things, and not to be relied on when it comes to tax advice or anything like that. You got to speak to your accountant. You got to get that individual advice. And obviously, you're there to help, Darren. So if anyone has any questions regarding their taxes, very first instance, they should reach out to someone like you, their accountant, and go through that and make sure they're getting the most up-to-date advice. I think it's very important just to say that before we get started. So I've got a few questions for you, and what we're thinking of today is just several of the kind of key areas where I think clients certainly say to me, oh, do I need an accountant? Oh, is there a tax liability? And I will often say, well, there could be, and that's why you need to talk to someone like Darren. And I guess just to start us off, one of the areas where many of my clients come to me and they say, well, actually, I need an accountant, Paul, can you put me in touch with someone, is becoming a accidental landlord. And just from your side, what is an accidental landlord? How does that occur from what you see from clients who approach you? And I know we've introduced clients over the years. How does an accidental landlord occur, and what do you do then in those situations to help those clients?
So an accidental landlord is effectively someone that ends up with a property, or additional property that they're going to let out by accident. Obviously, the most common one is they inherit a property. Relative passes away. Here's a property. They decide they don't want to sell it or whatever. They're going to let it out. They didn't necessarily look for the property. They didn't go out and say, "We've got surplus cash. Let's go and buy a property." It just sort of happened. And at that point, they then effectively become a landlord, by accident, and then have all the regulations that they need to follow with doing that, which is obviously can be a bit of a minefield in terms of mortgages and accountancy and insurances and all sorts, which they never really thought they'd never have to deal with, I guess. So that's what it is in a nutshell. And yeah, obviously, when you get a property, you never had a buy-to-let property, you never received any rental income, you just had your main residence, you start earning money, receiving rent, and that rent is taxable. We have, I'd say, numerous clients every year that come to us and may say, we've had a property for a couple of years and it suddenly dawned on us we haven't done a tax return. And that's when obviously we're here to help.
Okay. So as you say, it's that kind of accidental, not in the sense that they've not realized it could maybe happen, but it's just the scenarios come up, a property's been rented out. They hadn't purposely, because this is how it is very similar in the mortgage world. They've not deliberately set out to buy a property to rent it out for a profit and an investment. They've ended up with a property, very typically the main residence, I often find, which they've then moved out of maybe temporarily. They've gone overseas, they've moved in with family, or some of this change of circumstance and accidentally, as it were, needed to rent it out. And it's just remembering that, that income is, in most cases, taxable, or at least needs to be declared. And yeah, seeking tax advice around that is obviously very important.
Yeah.
When it comes to that kind of income, so let's say you had a property, you've had to move out temporarily, you've become this accidental landlord and you've started to rent out the property. How is that taxed? Is that just taxed at your normal tax rates? Is it different taxes for properties? How does that work?
So it's taxed. Let's say they're into their full property out, they've got the tenants in there for a year, because let's say they're moving away or whatever and moving for their job. It's taxed at income tax rates at their marginal rate of tax. So whether they're 20%, 40%, 45% taxpayer. So that's how it's taxed, and then it has to be done via self-assessment. So they may never have been in a position where they've had to do a tax return before, because they've a PAYE income, so they've just have their tax deducted. So at that point, you need to register with HMRC and inform them. It's up to the individual to inform HMRC, and then the HMRC would issue them with a unique taxpayer reference. Then they get a notice to file the tax return, and then they'd have to pay the tax.
Right. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? When you are PAYE, you could go through your whole life with never needing to do anything other than just go to work, pay your taxes through your income, and yes, maybe stamp duty when you buy a place, and that's kind of it. And it's just that realization. Sometimes you do then need to go outside of that envelope and declare taxes and get assistance with that. And even though it may sound complicated, ultimately it's really just down to a phone call to someone like you who can go, okay, this is your situation, this is what you need to do, send me a few forms and we'll help you with that. So it's certainly nothing scary, is it? It's just something you just got to
Exactly
deal
that.
with.
It's not actually that scary. Easy for me to say. I deal with it every day.
Yeah.
But for people that don't do it, it is probably quite a big thing. And HMRC is probably make people nervous, I guess. But it's like something that we can deal with, and it's a weight off of. I always find that a lot of clients say it's just a weight off their shoulders, something they don't want to deal with. And then they can obviously get us to deal with it, and we can get it all filed, and we know what you can and can't claim for, etc., for expenses against it, and make sure that they're paying the right amount of tax.
Mm. And do you find? I mean, it's something I've come across a few times with clients is where they've been renting property out, and I guess it's the accidental landlord's nature. They've rented a property out, and rightfully or wrongfully, just not, it's my property, I'm renting it out. Why do I need to declare it? And again, if you're a buy-to-let investor or a landlord, you're familiar with, income is coming in. There's a tax bill somewhere along the line. But those kind of accidental landlords, I think, often, people who've had a property in the family, they started to rent it out, they've not realized actually that income is almost like salary. You've got to pay tax on it, and that's led to a few clients I know over the years we've discussed with, and you've mentioned, who've come to you saying, "Oh, actually, I've got a property, I've been renting it out. Hang on a sec, should I have been paying tax on that?" And I think you've had a few scenarios like that, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely over the years where they've just not realised, I guess, that they've been earning. There could be could have been for a couple of years or whatever, and they just haven't realised. At that point, it's always best if we come forward to HMRC and say we've received this money, we need to do a tax return, and it's much better that way than HMRC coming to the individual and saying, we believe you're letting out a property. One thing that's been quite prominent over the last 4 or 5 years is a HMRC campaign called Let Property.
Right.
And basically is, if you're letting a property out for a letting agent, obviously letting agents have everybody's details. Now they have to give the information to HMRC to say who's been letting out properties. And HMRC have been doing a cross-reference to check who's filed tax returns and who hasn't. And if they haven't, then they've been writing to these individuals saying, we believe that you've been renting out property, and you get a period of time to disclose that and disclose how much you've received and how much tax you think you should pay and what penalties there may be, etc. And I would say in the last few years, I've had quite a few clients in that position, and we've helped them through that. And we've then dealt with HMRC on their behalf, and made sure that it's all been declared up to date. And HMRC, much rather, even if you're sitting there worried and thinking, oh, I'm in this situation, it's much better if you just come forward and then tell HMRC this is the situation, and it all gets sorted out basically, rather than thinking I'm going to sit and not do anything and then wait for them to come to you.
Yeah, I guess it's that. I mean, ignorance obviously is an excuse. It is your responsibility as an individual to work out if you have a liability, not for someone to necessarily tell you. But if there is a suggestion or a thought, actually, there could be a liability here, speak to an accountant, get that support. But as you say, it's much better to come forward and say, actually, okay, may have made a mistake here, should have been declaring this, didn't realize, but I now want to declare it. And yes, if there's a liability, we'll sort that out. Then the other side, which is HMRC, does an investigation, and then then it's a very different conversation, isn't it? Because you can't then say, well, I was going to declare it. Well, HMRC may not believe that at that point. And you've then got to deal with those consequences. So, it's always worth, I think, just if you're unsure, reach out to your accountant, and they'll very quickly say yes or no. And as you say, there's a scheme set up there to help people to disclose those when they've not realised.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you say, reach out to an accountant. Most accountants, we're always more than happy to have an initial phone call where we can go through the scenario and then advise from there, basically. And it may be the case there's nothing to do, which is probably in the individual best interest, but it may be that there is something to do, and then we can take it on board, and we can deal with HMRC and all that sort of stuff, and take the stress away. Basically, that's what we're here to do, really.
Definitely.
Let people concentrate on their daily lives and daily jobs and whatever else that's most important to them, really, and we can deal with the HMRC side, admin side of stuff that a lot of people probably don't want to deal with. So
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think with my clients when they come to me for mortgage advice, and buying and selling a property can obviously be quite stressful because there's a lot going on, or even refinancing, especially now in the higher interest rate environment we find ourselves in. But a lot of the time, it's just that reassurance from me of, look, it may sound quite complicated, and there's lots of things you've got to understand and do, and there's timings and all that. But at the end of the day, I'm here to help you with that. So to a certain degree, you haven't got to worry about it. You just got to sit back and let me help you, and we'll get through it. And that's the same, I guess, for you, isn't it? It's the HMRC tax returns. It can seem so complicated and yeah, kind of scary. You think, God, am I doing something wrong here? And actually, you don't need to worry about that. That's frankly your job to worry about. That's what keeps you in a job. And the client just needs to reach out to you, talk through what the situation is, and you'll quickly tell them, right, we're going to go this way. I need this document, and you just get it sorted.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, we will just need obviously all the information that we request, and that'll be the hardest task for the client, probably trying to gather all that information. But it's probably not as much as they actually think, to be honest. And then once we have all that, then it's in our hands, and we've got everything we need and can get it all dealt with. And inform the client of the exact position, inform HMRC, and yeah, they can then it's all dealt with, and they can relax basically.
And just thinking of that accidental landlord, a few clients of mine, obviously looking after London clients, international base of clients, so you get people from all over the world, which is half the excitement of working in London. You deal with so many interesting people from so many different areas of the world. And one thing I often come across is clients who have property overseas. And sometimes there are a misunderstanding that something, just because it's overseas, doesn't necessarily mean it's completely irrelevant from a UK taxation point of view, because once you become a resident for tax purposes, there are potential implications on assets held outside of the UK, and obviously there's impacts. Even I mean, first and foremost, potentially even stamp duty. If you own a property overseas and you're buying something in the UK, you can't necessarily say I'm a first-time buyer because, well, are you? Technically you already own a property. So there's an example there sometimes. And again, solicitors provide the ultimate advice around taxation on property purchases, but it's an area certainly that comes up. Have you had many scenarios there with clients who've had properties overseas, and I guess very similar to almost like the accidental landlord, haven't realised they've had to declare that income in the UK? And
so if you're a UK tax resident, effectively you get taxed on your worldwide income in the UK. So you would need to declare any income you're receiving from a property overseas and pay tax in the UK on it. It may be that you're also getting taxed in the country where the property is, but the UK has a number of tax treaties with a lot of countries now around the world, which basically means there's a double taxation treaty, which effectively means we could offset the tax that's withheld in the country that the property is against whatever is due in the UK on that property. But it has to be declared on the tax return. The other thing is capital gains as well. UK tax resident would be eligible to capital gains tax on overseas properties as well. So again, yes, there's something to consider there. And you may think that you've got a property overseas, that's fine, it's being dealt with in that country, but as a UK tax resident, you have to declare your worldwide income in the UK. So any income that you're earning overseas has to be declared in the UK as well if you're a UK tax resident.
Right. Okay. And an example of like a double taxation treaty, if you had let's say a client who had a property in Spain and sold that property in Spain, is there, I presume there's a double taxation treaty between the UK and Spain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
With that in mind, then if they sold a property and let's say there was a tax due, is it a scenario where if the tax rates in Spain are higher and the tax rates in the UK are lower for, let's say, a property sale, purely an example, if there was a higher liability in Spain due, does that mean there's a lower tax in the UK? Would the client be able to take advantage of the fact saying, oh, actually, I'm in the UK, there's a lower tax, therefore I'm due kind of a refund? Or would it be, well, actually, you pay the highest of wherever it is?
Yeah, they pay the higher. They don't get any rebate, but they wouldn't have any tax liability in the UK.
Right.
So whereas if it was the other way around, let's say it was slightly lower in Spain and higher in the UK, they'd have to pay the difference basically in the UK on what they haven't paid in Spain. But unfortunately, it doesn't work if it's the other way. The way where it's you pay.
Of course it doesn't.
Yes.
Of course it doesn't. That'd be too good. So I guess that double taxation is there to a benefit of making sure you're not paying tax twice on something.
Yeah. Correct.
But if there's a lower end of the scale, then yeah, it's going to be topped up in the UK. And if you've paid more overseas, then it's just I guess, declared, noted, nothing further to pay.
Your UK liability's been settled basically, but
okay.
Yeah. So.
And so actually, in some cases, when you consider, again, we won't name countries, but just think off the top of my head, there's some countries around the world and how their taxation on property is, and quite often I think that's quite higher than the UK. So you could end up in a position where you've just got to declare it, but frankly, you've already paid the taxes overseas. There's nothing further to worry about in the UK, most likely.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Darren, for talking through those parts there around being an accidental landlord and the tax implications around that. That's really useful. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks. Good to speak.
Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, please ask below and hit subscribe below so you don't miss out on our next episode.